Fuel scooping. Fuel scooping complete. Orbital flight engaged. Frameshift drive charging. 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage. Frameshift drive charging. Ready to engage. 3, 2, 1. Engage. Warning, frameshift drive operating beyond safety limits. Warning, frameshift drive operating beyond safety limits. Warning, frameshift drive operating beyond safety limits. Orbital flight engaged. Warning, frameshift drive operating beyond safety limits. Landing gear deployed. Low gravity warning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just come to me and I'll drop the relic.
Cargo scoop deployed.
So I got them all charged. Here, I'll jettison it now. I just gotta scan this orb here. You gotta use the comp scanner, so if it's not in your fire group, you gotta add it.
Under attack. Chassis integrity compromised.
What exactly happened? Well, are you at a station right now?
Frameshift drive charging.
in general, I don't think there's a need to come back here unless you want to farm more relics. But for the discovery part, I believe we can just go to a station now.
Ready to engage. 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Yeah, so you can test that out if you want, since I'm still here. But it'll take me a while to get out of here. You can go to a station and sell your exploration data to see if it puts our names on it. Well, I don't know what you're doing. Alright.
Heatsink deployed.
We see on our sensors, Commander. Standard flight regulations are in place around this carrier. Access granted. Please proceed to your landing pad, Commander. You're clear for automated approach. Please sit back and relax, Commander.
Landing gear deployed.
On the ship. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Landing successful. Clamps engaged. Welcome, Commander.
Yeah.
Landing gear retracted.
Ship has released. You are clear to leave.
So we got a mega ship or what? So you were just back at the station? Oh, okay.
Frameshift drive charging.
You are now clear of the area. Take care, Commander.
4, 3, 2, 1. Engage. Warning, frameshift drive operating beyond safety limits. Orbital flight engaged.
Alright, well, I'm gonna try selling the data and see what happens.
Hull integrity compromised. Frameshift drive charging. Frameshift drive charging. Ready to engage. Four, three, two, one. Engage.
I guess after you said you scanned it, the orb started going back into the structure, and then a bunch of sentinels spawned. But they were attacking me. Maybe it spawned on top of you, and they didn't like that.
Landing gear deployed.
I don't remember the name of this stupid station.
Low gravity warning. Under attack. Target destroyed. Cargo scoop deployed. Handbrake is on. Cargo hold at maximum capacity. cargo hold at maximum capacity. Cargo hold at maximum capacity. Handbrake is on.
Turner took the gun in his hand and thumbed the battery test. I was talking to her just now. He jerked his head in the direction of the door. The site man's out of L.A., kid called Ramirez. They any good? Turner replaced the dust cover. Better be, for what they'll cost. Jaylene's gotten herself a hot rep the past 2 years, and Ramirez is her understudy. Shit. Conroy shrugged. You know these cowboys. Fucking crazy. Where'd you get them? Where'd you get Oki, for that matter? Conroy smiled. From your agent, Turner. Turner stared at Conroy, then nodded. Turning, he lifted the edge of the next dust cover. Cases, plastic and styrofoam, stacked neatly on the cold metal of the table. He touched a blue plastic rectangle stamped with a silver monogram, S and W. Your agent, Conroy said, as Turner snapped the case open. The pistol lay there in its molded bed of pale blue foam, a massive revolver with an ugly housing that bulged beneath the squat barrel. S&W Tactical 408 with a xenon projector, Conroy said. What he said you'd want. Turner took the gun in his hand and thumbed the battery test stud for the projector.
Handbrake is on.
The red LED in the walnut grip pulsed twice. He swung the cylinder out. Ammunition? On the table. Hand loads, explosive tips. Turner found a transparent cube of amber plastic, opened it with his left hand, and extracted a cartridge. Why did they pick me for this, Conroy? He examined the cartridge, then inserted it carefully into one of the cylinder's 6 chambers. I don't know, Conroy said. Felt like they had you slotted from go, whenever they heard from Mitchell. Turner spun the cylinder rapidly and snapped it back into the frame. I said, why did they pick me for this, Conroy? He raised the pistol with both hands and extended his arms, pointing it directly at Conroy's face. Gun like this, sometimes you can see right down the bore. If the light's right. See if there's a bullet there. Conroy shook his head very slightly. Or maybe you can see it in one of the other chambers. No. Conroy said very softly. No way. Maybe the shrink screwed up, Conroy. How about that? No. Conroy said, his face blank. They didn't, and you won't. Turner pulled the trigger. The hammer clicked on an empty chamber. Conroy blinked once, opened his mouth, closed it, watched as Turner lowered the Smith & Wesson. A single bead of sweat rolled down from Conroy's hairline and lost itself in an eyebrow. Well? Turner asked, the gun at his side. Conroy shrugged. Don't do that shit, he said. They want me that bad? Conroy nodded. It's your show, Turner. Where's Mitchell? He opened the cylinder again and began to load the 5 remaining chambers. Arizona, about 50 kilos from the Sonora line, in a Mesa Top Research Arcology. Moss Biolabs North America. They own everything around there, right down to the border, and the Mesa's smack in the middle of the footprints of 4 recon satellites. Mucho tight. And how are we supposed to get in? We aren't. Mitchell's coming out on his own. We wait for him, pick him up, get his ass to Hosaka intact. Conroy hooked a forefinger behind the open collar of his black shirt and drew out a length of black nylon cord, then a small black nylon envelope with a Velcro fastener. He opened it carefully and extracted an object, which he offered to Turner on his open palm. Here. This is what he sent. Turner put the gun down on the nearest table and took the thing from Conroy. It was like a swollen gray Microsoft. One end routine Neurojack. The other a strange rounded formation unlike anything he'd seen. What is it? It's Biosoft. Jaylene jacked it and said she thought it was output from an AI. It's sort of a dossier on Mitchell, with a message to Osaka tacked on the end. You better jack it yourself. You want to get the picture fast. Turner glanced up from the gray thing. How to grab Jaylene. She said you better be lying down when you do it.
Actually,
She
comprehensively,
didn't seem to like it
I don't really
much.
understand this. But the more I jumped,
Machine dreams
the
hold a
further
special
I was allowed
vertigo.
to jump. I was monitoring it on my
Turner lay
panel,
down
and it
on a
kept going
virgin
up.
slab
I don't
of green
understand.
temper foam in the makeshift dorm and jacked Mitchell's dossier.
So, like, I started when I first
Came
did
on
this
slow.
journey. It was
He had
36.
time to close his eyes.
Now it says
10 seconds later, his eyes were open. He clutched the green foam and fought
like
his
42.
nausea. Again, he closed his eyes.
Uh,
It came on,
yeah, 42. I don't get it.
gradually,
Like 10 jumps ago, it said 40.
flickering,
So
non-linear
makes no
flood
sense. I'm
of
full
fact
healed,
and
so
sensory
yeah,
data.
it should
A
be
kind
less,
of
quite frankly.
narrative conveyed in surreal jump cuts and juxtapositions. It was vaguely like riding a roller coaster that phased in and out of
Well, first it
existence
makes
at
sense. It should
random,
be less, but yeah,
in
I don't
possibly
know. I don't get it.
rapid intervals, changing altitude, attack, and direction with each pulse of nothingness, except that the shifts had nothing to do with any physical orientation, but rather with lightning alternations in paradigm and symbol system. The data had never been intended for human input. Eyes open, he pulled the thing from his socket and held it, his palm slick with sweat. It was like waking from a nightmare. Not a screamer, where impacted fears took on simple, terrible shapes, but the sort of dream infinitely more disturbing, where everything is perfectly and horribly normal, and where everything is utterly wrong. The intimacy of the thing was hideous. He fought down waves of raw transference, bringing all his will to bear on crushing a feeling that was akin to love. The obsessive tenderness a watcher comes to feel for the subject of prolonged surveillance. Days or hours later, he knew the most minute details of Mitchell's academic record might bob to the surface of his mind. Or the name of a mistress, the scent of her heavy red hair in the sunlight through. He sat up quickly, the plastic soles of his shoes smacking the rusted deck. He still wore the parka, and the Smith & Wesson in his side pocket swung painfully against his hip. It would pass. Mitchell's psychic odor would fade, as surely as the Spanish grammar in the lexicon evaporated after each use. What he had experienced was a mass security dossier
Cargo hold at
compiled by
maximum
a
capacity.
sentient computer. Nothing more. He replaced the Biosoft in Conroy's little black wallet, smoothed the Velcro seal with his thumb, and put the cord around his neck. He became aware of the sound of waves lapping the flanks of the rig. "Hey, boss," someone said from beyond the brown military blanket that screened
I don't
the
know how to
entrance to the
sample this
dorm.
data.
"Conroy says it's time for you to inspect the troops. Then you and him depart for other parts." Oki's bearded face slid from behind the blanket.
Target
"Otherwise,
destroyed.
I wouldn't wake you up, right?" "I wasn't sleeping," Turner said, and stood, fingers reflexively kneading the skin around the implanted socket. "Too bad," Oki said. "I got derms will put you under all the way. 1 hour on the button, then kicking some kind of righteous upper, get you up and on the case, no lie." Turner shook his head. "Take me to Conroy." Chapter 5. The Job. Marley checked into a small hotel with green plants and heavy brass pots. The corridors tiled like worn marble chessboards. The elevator was a scrolled gilt cage with rosewood panels, smelling of lemon oil and small cigars. Her room was on the 5th floor. A single tall window overlooked the avenue. The kind of window you could actually open. When the smiling bellman had gone, she collapsed into an armchair, whose plush fabric contrasted comfortably with the muted Belgian carpet. She undid the zips on her old Paris boots for the last time, kicked them off, and stared at the dozen glossy carrier bags the bellman had arranged on the bed. Tomorrow, she thought, she'd buy luggage and a toothbrush. I'm in shock, she said to the bags on the bed. I must take care. Nothing seems real now. She looked down and saw that her hose were both out at the toe. She shook her head. Her new purse lay on the white marble table beside the bed. It was black, cut from cowhide tanned thick and soft as Flemish butter. It had cost more than she would have owed Andrea for her share of a month's rent. But that was also true of a single night's stay in this hotel.
Okay.
The purse contained her passport and the credit chip she'd been issued in the Galerie du Perret, drawn on an account held in her name by an orbital branch of the Nederlands Algemeen Bank. She went into the bathroom and worked the smooth brass levers of the big white tub. Hot, aerated water hissed out through a Japanese filtration device. The hotel provided packets of bath salts, tubes of creams, and scented oils. She emptied a tube of oil into the filling tub and began to remove her clothes, feeling a pang of loss when she tossed the Sally Stanley behind her. Until an hour before, the year-old jacket had been her favorite garment, and perhaps the single most expensive thing she'd ever owned.
There might be somebody already got
It was something for the cleaners to take away. Perhaps it would find its way to one of the city's flea markets. The sort of place where she'd hunted bargains as an art school girl.
Target
The mirrors
destroyed.
misted and ran as the room filled with scented steam, blurring the reflection of her nakedness. Was it really this easy? Had Virek's slim gold credit chip checked her out of her misery and into this hotel, where the towels were white and thick and scratchy? She was aware of a certain spiritual vertigo, as though she trembled at the edge of some precipice. She wondered how powerful money could actually be if one had enough of it, really enough. She supposed that only the Vireks of the world could really know. And very likely, they were functionally incapable of knowing. Asking Virek would be like interrogating a fish in order to learn more about
the
life.
ruins.
Yes, my dear, it's wet. Yes, my child, it's certainly warm, scented, scratchy towel. She stepped into the tub and lay down. Tomorrow she would have her haircut in Paris. Andrea's phone rang 16 times before Marley remembered the special program. It would still be in place, and this expensive little Brussels hotel would not be listed. She leaned out to replace the handset on the marble-topped table, and it chimed once, softly. A courier has delivered a parcel from the Galerie du Perret. When the bellman, a younger man this time, dark and possibly Spanish, had gone, she took the package to the window and turned it over in her hands. It was wrapped in a single sheet of handmade paper, dark gray, folded and tucked in that mysterious Japanese way that required neither glue nor string. But she knew that once she'd opened it, she'd never get it folded again. The name and address of the Galerie were embossed in one corner, and her name and the name of her hotel were handwritten across the center in perfect italic script. She unfolded the paper and found herself holding a new brown hollow projector and a flat envelope of clear plastic. The envelope contained 7 numbered tabs of holofiche. Beyond the miniature iron balcony, the sun was going down, painting the old town gold. She heard car horns and the cries of children. She closed the window and crossed to a writing desk. The brown was a smooth black rectangle powered by solar cells. She checked the charge, then took the first holofiche from the envelope and slotted it. The box she'd seen in Virak's simulation of the Guel Park blossomed above the brown, glowing with the crystal resolution of the finest museum-grade holograms. Bone and circuit gold, dead lace, and a dull white marble rolled from clay. Molly shook her head. How could anyone have arranged these bits, this garbage, in such a way that it caught at the heart, snagged in the soul like a fishhook? But then she nodded. It could be done, she knew. It had been done many years ago by a man named Cornell, who'd also made boxes. Then she glanced to the left, where the elegant gray paper lay on the desktop. She'd chosen this hotel at random, when she'd grown tired of shopping. She'd told no one she was here, and certainly no one from the Galerie du Poré. Chapter 6. Barrytown. He stayed out for something like 8 hours, by the clock in his mother's Hitachi. Came to staring at its dusty face, some hard thing wedged under his thigh. The Ono Sendai. He rolled over. Stale puke smell. Then he was in the shower, not sure quite how he'd gotten there, spinning the taps with his clothes still on. He clawed and dug and pulled at his face. It felt like a rubber mask. Something happened. Something bad, big, he wasn't sure what. His wet clothes gradually mounded up on the tile floor of the shower. Finally, he stepped out, went to the sink and flicked wet hair back from his eyes, peered at the face in the mirror. Bobby Newmark. No problem. No Bobby problem. Got a problem. Towel around his shoulders, dripping water, he followed the narrow hallway to his bedroom, a tiny wedge-shaped space at the very back of the condo. His hollow porn unit lit as he stepped in, half a dozen girls grinning, eyeing him with evident delight. They seemed to be standing beyond the walls of the room in hazy vistas of powder blue space, their white smiles and taut young bodies bright as neon. 2 of them edged forward and began to touch themselves. "Stop it," he said. The projection unit shut itself down at his command. The dream girls vanished. The thing had originally belonged to Ling Warren's older brother. The girls' hair and clothes were dated and vaguely ridiculous. You could talk with them and get them to do things with themselves and each other. Bobby remembered being 13 and in love with Brandy, the one with the blue rubber pants. Now he valued the projections mainly for the illusion of space they could provide in the makeshift bedroom. "Something fucking happened," he said, pulling on black jeans and an almost clean shirt. He shook his head. "What? Fucking what? Some kind of power surge on the line? Some fluky action down at the Fission Authority? Maybe the base he'd tried to invade had suffered some strange breakdown or been attacked from another quarter. But he was left with the sense of having met someone who... He'd unconsciously extended his right hand, fingers spread beseechingly. "Fuck!" he said. The fingers balled into a fist. Then it came back. First, The sense of the big thing, the really big thing, reaching for him across cyberspace, and then the girl impression. Someone brown, slender, crouching somewhere in a strange bright dark full of stars and wind.
Handbrake is on.
But it slid away as his mind went for it. Hungry, he got into sandals and headed back toward the kitchen, rubbing at his hair with a damp towel. On his way through the living room, he noticed the telltale of the Ono Sendai glaring at him from the carpet. Oh, shit. He stood there and sucked at his teeth. It was still jacked in. Was it possible that it was still linked with the base he'd tried to run? Could they tell he wasn't dead? He had no idea. One thing he did know, though, was that they'd have his number and good. He hadn't bothered with the cutouts and frills that would have kept them from running a backtrack. They had his address. Hunger forgotten, he spun into the bathroom and rooted through the soggy clothing until he found his credit chip. He had 210 new yen stashed in the hollow plastic handle of a multi-bit screwdriver. Screwdriver and credit chip secure in his jeans, he pulled on his oldest, heaviest pair of boots, then clawed unwashed clothing from beneath the bed. He came up with a black canvas jacket with at least a dozen pockets. One of them, a single huge pouch across the small of the back, a kind of integral rucksack. There was a Japanese gravity knife with orange handles beneath his pillow. That went into a narrow pocket on the jacket's left sleeve, near the cuff. The dream girls clicked in as he was leaving. Bobby, Bobby, come back and play. In his living room, he yanked the Ono Sendai's jack from the face of the Hitachi, coiling the fiber optic lead and tucking it into a pocket. He did the same with the Trode set, then slid the Ono Sendai into the jacket's pack pocket. The curtains were still drawn. He felt a surge of some new exhilaration. He was leaving. He had to leave. Already he'd forgotten the pathetic fondness that his brush with death had generated. He parted the curtains carefully, a thumb-wide gap, and peered out. It was late afternoon. In a few hours, the first lights would start blinking on in the dark bulks of the projects. Big playground swept away like a concrete sea. The projects rose beyond the opposite shore. Vast rectilinear structures, softened by a random overlay of retrofitted greenhouse balconies, catfish tanks, solar heating systems, and the ubiquitous chicken wire dishes. Tuade would be up there now, sleeping, in a world Bobby had never seen. The world of a Mincome arcology. Tuade came down to do business, mostly with the hot doggers in Barrytown, and then he climbed back up. It had always looked good to Bobby up there. So much happening on the balconies at night, amid red smudges of charcoal. Little kids in their underwear swarming like monkeys, so small you could barely see them. Sometimes the wind would shift, and the smell of cooking would settle over big playground. And sometimes you'd see an ultralight glide out from some secret country of rooftops so high up there. And always the mingled beat from a million speakers. Waves of music that pulsed and faded in and out of the wind. Tuade never talked about his life, where he lived. Tuade talked biz, or, to be more social, women. What Tuade said about women made Bobby want to get out of Barrytown worse than ever. And Bobby knew that biz would be his only ticket out. But now he needed the dealer in a different way, because now he was entirely out of his depth. Maybe Tuade could tell him what was happening. There wasn't supposed to be any lethal stuff around that base. Tuade had picked it out for him, then rented him the software he'd need to get in, and Tuade was ready to fence anything he could have gotten out with. So Tuade had to know. Know something anyway. I don't even have your number, man, he said to the projects, letting the curtains fall shut. Should he leave something for his mother? A note? My ass, he said to the room behind him. Outta here. And then he was out the door and down the hall, headed for the stairs. Forever, he added, kicking open an exit door. Big Playground looked safe enough, except for a lone shirtless duster, deep in some furious conversation with God. Bobby cut the duster a wide circle. He was shouting and jumping and karate chopping the air. The duster had dried blood on his bare feet, and the remnants of what had probably been a Loeb haircut. Big Playground was neutral territory, at least in theory, and the Loebs were loosely confederated with the Gothics. Bobby had fairly solid affiliations with the Gothics, but retained his indie status. Barrytown was a dicey place to be an indie. At least, he thought, as the duster's angry gibberish faded behind him. The gangs gave you some structure. If you were Gothic and the casuals chopped you out, it made sense. Maybe the ultimate reasons behind it were crazy, but there were rules. But indies got chopped out by dusters running on brainstem, by roaming predatory loonies from as far away as New York, like that penis collector character last summer. Kept the goods in his pocket in a plastic bag. Bobby had been trying to chart a way out of this landscape since the day he was born, or anyway it felt that way. Now, as he walked, the cyberspace deck in the pack pocket banged against his spine, like it too was urging him to get out. Come on, 2 a day, he said to the looming projects. Get your ass down out of there and be in Leon's when I get there, okay? 2 a day wasn't in Leon's. Nobody was. Unless you wanted to count Leon, who was probing the inner mysteries of a wall screen converter with a bent paperclip. Why don't you just get a hammer and pound the fucker till it works? Bobby asked. Do you about as much good. Leon looked up from the converter. He was probably in his 40s, but it was hard to say. He seemed to be of no particular race, or in certain lights to belong to some race that nobody else belonged to. Lots of hypertrophied facial bone and a mane of curly, non-reflective black hair. His basement pirate club had been a fixture in Bobby's life for the past 2 years. Leon stared dully at Bobby with his unnerving eyes, pupils of nacreous gray overlaid with a hint of translucent olive. Leon's eyes made Bobby think of oysters and nail polish, 2 things he didn't particularly like to think about in connection with eyes. The color was like something they'd used to upholster bar stools. I just mean you can't fix shit like that by poking at it, Bobby added uncomfortably. Leon shook his head slowly and went back to his exploration. People paid to get into the place because Leon pirated Kino and SimStim off cable and ran a lot of stuff that Barrytowners couldn't otherwise afford to access. There was dealing in the back, and you could make donations for drinks. Mostly clean Ohio hooch, cut with some synthetic orange drink Leon scored in industrial quantities. Say, Leon, Bobby began again. You seen 2 a day in here lately? The horrible eyes came up again and regarded Bobby for entirely too long. No. Maybe last night? No. Night before? No. Oh. Okay. Thanks. There was no point in giving Leon a hard time. Lots of reasons not to, actually. Bobby looked around at the wide, dim room, at the SimStim units and the unlit Kino screens. The club was a series of nearly identical rooms in the basement of a semi-residential rack zoned for singles and a sprinkling of light industry. Good soundproofing. You hardly ever heard the music, not from outside. Plenty of nights he'd popped out of Leon's with a head full of noise and pills into what seemed a magic vacuum of silence, his ears ringing all the way home across Big Playground. Now he had an hour probably before the first Gothic started to arrive. The dealers, mostly black guys from the projects, or whites from the city, or some other burb, wouldn't turn up until there was a patch of Gothics for them to work on. Nothing made a dealer look worse than just sitting there, waiting, because that would mean you weren't getting any action, and there was no way a genuinely hot dealer would be hanging out in Leon's just for the pleasure of it. It was all hot dog shit in Leon's. Weekenders with cheap decks who watched Japanese icebreaker kinos. But Tuade wasn't like that, he told himself, on his way up the concrete stairs. Tuade was on his way. Out of the projects, out of Barrytown, out of Leon's. On his way to the Cité. To Paris, maybe, or Chiba. The Onosendai bumped against his spine. He remembered that Tuade's icebreaker cassette was still in it. He didn't want to have to explain that to anyone. He passed a news kiosk. A yellow fax of the New York edition of the Asahi Shimbun was reeling past a plastic window in the mirrored siding. Some government going down in Africa. Russian stuff from Mars. It was that time of day when you could see things very clear. See every little thing so far down the streets, fresh green just starting from the black branches of the trees and their holes in the concrete, and the flash of steel on a girl's boot a block away, like looking through a special kind of water that made seeing easier, even though it was nearly dark. He turned and stared up at the projects. Whole floors there were forever unlit, either derelict or the windows blacked out. What did they do in there? Maybe he'd ask Tuade sometime. He checked the time on the kiosk's Coke clock. His mother would be back from Boston by now. Had to be. Or else she'd miss one of her favorite soaps. New hole in her head. She was crazy anyway. Nothing wrong with the socket she'd had since before he was born. But she'd been whining for years about static and resolution and sensory bleed over, so she'd finally swung the credit to go to Boston for some cheap-ass replacement. Kind of place where you don't even get an appointment for an operation. Walk in and they just slap it in your head. He knew her, yeah. How she'd come through the door with a wrapped bottle under her arm, not even take her coat off, just go straight over and jack into the Hitachi. Soap her brains out good for 6 solid hours. Her eyes would unfocus. And sometimes, if it was a really good episode, she'd drool a little. About every 20 minutes, she'd manage to remember to take a ladylike nip out of the bottle. She'd always been that way, as long as he could remember. Gradually sliding deeper into her half-dozen synthetic lives. Sequential SimStim fantasies Bobby had had to hear about all his life. He still harbored creepy feelings that some of the characters she talked about were relatives of his. Rich and beautiful aunts and uncles who might turn up one day, if only he weren't such a little shit. Maybe he thought now it had been true, in a way. She'd jacked that shit straight through the pregnancy. Because she'd told him she had. So he, fetus Newmark, curled up in there, had reverberated to about 1,000 hours of People of Importance and Atlanta. But he didn't like to think about being curled up in Marcia Newmark's belly. It made him feel sweaty and kind of sick. Marcia Mama. Only in the past year or so had Bobby come to understand the world well enough, as he now saw it, to wonder exactly how she still managed to make her way in it, marginal as that way had become, with her bottle and the socket ghosts to keep her company. Sometimes, when she was in a certain mood, and had had the right number of nips, she still tried to tell him stories about his father. He'd known since age 4 that these were bullshit, because the details changed from time to time. But for years, he'd allowed himself a certain pleasure in them anyway. He found a loading bay a few blocks west of Leon's, screened from the street by a freshly painted blue dumpster. The new paint gleaming over pocked, dented steel. There was a single halogen tube slung above the bay. He found a comfortable ledge of concrete and sat down there, careful not to jar the Ono Sendai. Sometimes you just had to wait. That was one of the things Two-A-Day had taught him. The dumpster was overflowing with a varied hash of industrial scrap. Barrytown had its share of gray legal manufacturers, part of the shadow economy the news faces like to talk about. But Bobby never paid much attention to news faces. Biz. It was all just biz. Moth strobed crooked orbits around the halogen tube. Bobby watched blankly as threads, maybe at the old, scaled the blue wall of the dumpster with a lame, dirty nylon line and a makeshift grapple. Might once have been part of a coat rack. When the last one made it over the top, into the mess plastic scrap, the line was drawn swiftly up. The scrap began to creak and rust. Just like me, Bobby thought. I used to do that shit. My room up with weird garbage I'd find. One time, Lane Warren's sister found most of somebody's arm, all wrapped in plastic and done up with rubber bands. Marsha Mahmoud get these 2-hour fits of religion sometimes. Come into Bobby's room and sweep all his best garbage out and gum some god-awful self-adhesive hologram up over his bed. Maybe Jesus, maybe Hubbard, maybe Virgin Mary. It didn't much matter to her when the mood was on her. It used to piss Bobby off real good, until one day he was big enough to walk into the front room with a ball-peen hammer and cock it over the Hitachi. You touch my stuff again and I'll kill your friends, Mom. All of them. She never tried it again. But the stick on holograms had actually had some effect on Bobby, because religion was now something he felt he'd considered and put aside. Basically, the way he figured it, there were just some people around who needed that shit. And he guessed there always had been, but he wasn't one of them. So, he didn't. Now one of the dumpster kids popped up and conducted a slit-eyed survey of the immediate area, then ducked out of sight again. There was a clunking, scraping sound. Small white hands tipped a dented alloy canister up and over the edge, lowering it on the nylon line. Good score, Bobby thought. You could take the thing to a metal dealer and get a little for it. They lowered the thing to the pavement,
retracted,
about a meter from the soles of Bobby's boots. As it touched down, it happened to twist around, showing him the 6-horned symbol that stood for biohazard. "Hey, fuck!" he said, drawing his feet up reflexively. One of them slid down the rope and steadied the canister. The other two followed. He saw that they were younger than he'd thought. "Hey," Bobby said, "you know that could be some real bad shit? Give you cancer and stuff." "Go lick a dog's ass till it bleeds," the first kid down the rope advised him, as they flicked their grapple loose, coiled their line, and dragged the canister around the corner of the dumpster and out of sight. He gave it an hour and a half. Time enough. Leon's was starting to cook. At least 20 Gothics postured in the main room like a herd of baby dinosaurs, their crests of lacquered hair bobbing and twitching. The majority approached the Gothic ideal. Tall, lean, muscular, but touched by a certain gaunt restlessness. Young athletes in the early stages of consumption.
Deployed.
The graveyard pallor was mandatory, and Gothic hair was by definition black. Bobby knew that the few who couldn't warp their bodies to fit the subcultural template were best avoided. A short Gothic was trouble. A fat Gothic, homicidal. Now he watched them flexing and glittering in Leon's like a composite creature, slime mold with a jigsaw surface of dark leather and stainless spikes. Most of them had nearly identical faces, features reworked to match ancient archetypes culled from Kino banks. He chose a particularly artful Dean, whose hair swayed like the mating display of a nocturnal lizard. "Bro," Bobby began, uncertain if he'd met this one before. "My man," the Dean responded languidly, his left cheek distended by a cut of resin. "The Count, baby," as an aside to his girl. "Count Zero Interrupt." Long pale hand with a fresh scab across the back, grabbing ass through the girl's leather skirt. "Count, this is my squeeze." The Gothic girl regarded Bobby with mild interest, but no flash of human recognition whatever, as though she was seeing an ad for a product she'd heard of but had no intention of buying. Bobby scanned the crowd. A few blank faces, but none he knew. No two-a-day. "Say, hey," he confided. "How you know how it is and all? I'm looking for this close, personal friend, business friend." And at this, the Gothic sagely bobbed his crest. "Goes by 2 a day." He paused. The Gothic looked blank, snapping his resin. The girl looked bored, restless. "Wereman," Bobby added, raising his eyebrows. "Black wereman. 2 a day," the Gothic said. "Sure. 2 a day. Right, babe?" His girl tossed her head and looked away. "You know him?" "Sure." "He here tonight?" "No," the Gothic said and smiled meaninglessly. Bobby opened his mouth, closed it, forced himself to nod. "Thanks, bro." "Anything for my man," the Gothic said. Another hour, more of the same. Too much white, chalk-pale Gothic white. Flat, bright eyes of their girls, their boot heels like ebony needles. He tried to stay out of the SimStim room, where Leon was running some kind of weird jungle fuck tape, phased you in and out of these different kind of animals. A lot of crazed arboreal action up in the trees, which Bobby found a little disorienting. He was hungry enough now to feel a little spaced. Or maybe it was afterburn from whatever it was had happened to him before. But he was starting to have a hard time concentrating, and his thoughts drifted in odd directions. Like who, for instance, had climbed up into those trees full of snakes and wired a pair of those rat things for SimStim? The Gothics were into it, whoever. They were thrashing and stomping and generally into major tree rat identification. Leon's new hit tape, Bobby decided. Just to his left, but well out of range of the stim, 2 project girls stood, their Baroque finery in sharp contrast with Gothic monochrome. Long black frock coats opened over tight red vests and silk brocade, the tails of enormous white shirts hanging well beneath their knees. Their dark features were concealed beneath the brims of fedoras, pinned and hung with fragments of antique gold, stick pins, charms, teeth, mechanical watches. Bobby watched them covertly. The clothes said they had money, but that someone would make it worth your ass if you tried to go for it. One time, Tuade had come down from the projects in this ice blue shaved velour number with diamond buckles at the knees, like maybe he hadn't had time to change. But Bobby had acted like the wearman was dressed in his usual leathers because he figured a cosmopolitan attitude was crucial in biz. He tried to imagine going up to them so smooth, just putting it to them. "Hey, you ladies surely must know my good friend Mr. Tuade." But they were older than he was, taller, and moved with a dignity he found intimidating. Probably they'd just laugh, but somehow he didn't want that at all. What he did want now, and very badly, was food. He touched his credit chip through the denim of his jeans. He'd go across the street and get a sandwich. Then he remembered why he was here, and suddenly it didn't seem very smart to use his chip. If he'd been sussed, after his attempted run, they'd have his chip number by now. Using it would spotlight him for anyone tracking him in cyberspace. Pick him out in the Barrytown grid like a highway flare in a dark football stadium. He had his cash money, but you couldn't pay for food with that. It wasn't actually illegal to have the stuff. It was just that nobody ever did anything legitimate with it. He'd have to find a Gothic with a chip, buy a new yen's worth of credit, probably at a vicious discount, then have the Gothic pay for the food. And what the hell was he supposed to take his change in? "Maybe you're just spooked," he told himself. He didn't know for sure that he was being backtracked. And the base he'd tried to crack was legit, or was supposed to be legit. That was why Tuade had told him he didn't have to worry about black ice. Who'd put lethal feedback programs around a place that leased soft Kino porn? The idea had been that he'd bleep out a few hours of digitalized Kino. New stuff that hadn't made it to the bootleg market. It wasn't the kind of score anybody was liable to kill you for. But somebody had tried. And something else had happened. Something entirely else. He trudged back up the stairs again, out of Leon's. He knew there was a lot he didn't know about the Matrix, but he'd never heard of anything that weird. You got ghost stories, sure, and hot doggers who swore they'd seen things in cyberspace, but he had them figured for Wilsons who jacked in dusted. You could hallucinate in the Matrix as easily as anywhere else. Maybe that's what happened, he thought. The voice was just part of dying, being flatlined, some crazy bullshit your brain threw up to make you feel better, and something had happened back at the source, maybe a brownout in their part of the grid, so the ice had lost its hold on his nervous system. Maybe. But he didn't know. Didn't know the turf. His ignorance had started to dig into him recently because it kept him from making the moves he needed to make. He hadn't ever much thought about it before, but he didn't really know that much about anything in particular. In fact, up until he'd started hot dogging, he'd felt like he knew about as much as he needed to. And that was what the Gothics were like. And that was why the Gothics would stay here and burn themselves down on dust, or get chopped out by casuals. And the process of attrition would produce the percentage of them who'd somehow become the next wave of childbearing, condo-buying Barrytowners. And the whole thing could go round again. He was like a kid who'd grown up beside an ocean, taking it as much for granted as he took the sky, but knowing nothing of currents, shipping routes, or the ins and outs of weather. He'd used decks in school, toys that shuttled you through the infinite reaches of that space that wasn't space. Mankind's unthinkably complex, consensual hallucination. The Matrix. Cyberspace. Where the great corporate hot cores burned like neon novas. Data so dense you suffered sensory overload if you tried to apprehend more than the merest outline. But since he'd started hot-dogging, he had some idea of how precious little he knew about how anything worked, and not just in the Matrix. It spilled over somehow, and he'd started to wonder and think. How Barrytown worked, what kept his mother going, why Gothics and casuals invested all that energy in trying to kill each other off. Or why Two-A-Day was black and lived up in the projects, and what made that different. As he walked, he kept up his search for the dealer. White faces, more white faces. His stomach had started to make a certain amount of noise. He thought about the fresh package of wheat cutlets in the fridge at home. Fry them up with some soy and crack a pack of krill wafers. Passing the kiosk again, he checked the Coke clock. Marcia was home for sure, deep in the labyrinthine complexities of people of importance, whose female protagonist's life she'd shared through a socket for almost 20 years. The Asahi Shimbun fax was still rolling down behind its little window, and he stepped closer, in time to see the first report of the bombing of A Block Level 3 Covina Concourse Courts, Barrytown, New Jersey. Then it was gone, past. And there was a story about the formal funeral of the Cleveland Yakuza boss, strictly trad. They all carried black umbrellas. He'd lived all his life in 503 A Block. That enormous thing, leaning in, to stomp Marcia Newmark and her Hitachi flat. And of course, it had been meant for him. There's somebody doesn't mess around, he heard himself say. Hey, my man, Count, you dusted, bro? Hey, where you heading? The eyes of two Deans twisting to follow him in the course of his headlong panic. Chapter 7. The Mall. Conroy swung the blue Fokker off the eroded ribbon of pre-war highway and throttled down. The long rooster tail of pale dust that had followed them from Needles began to settle. The hovercraft sank into its inflated apron bag as they came to a halt. Here's the venue, Turner. What hit it? Rectangular expanse of concrete spreading to uneven walls of weathered cinder block. Economics, Conroy said. Before the war. They never finished it. 10 clicks west of here and there's whole subdivisions, just pavement grids, no houses, nothing. How big a site, team? 9, not counting you. And the medics. What medics? Hosaka's. Moss's biologicals, right? No telling how they might have our boy kinked, so Hosaka's built a regular little neurosurgery and staffed it with 3 hotshots. 2 of them are company men. The third's a Korean who knows black medicine from both ends. Medical pod's in that long one there. He pointed. Got a partial section of roof. How'd you get it on site? Brought it from Tucson inside a tanker. Faked a breakdown. Got it out. Rolled it in. Took all hands. Maybe 3 minutes. Moss. Turner said. Sure. Conroy killed the engines. Chance you take. He said in the abrupt silence. Maybe they missed it. Our guy in the tanker sat there and bitched to his dispatcher in Tucson on the CB, all about his shit-eating heat exchanger and how long it was going to take to fix it. Figure they picked that up. You think of a better way to do it? No? Given that the client wants the thing on the site, but we're sitting here now in the middle of their recon footprint. Sweetheart. And Conroy snorted. Maybe we just stopped for a screw. Break up our trip to Tucson, right? It's that kind of place. People stop here to piss, you know. He checked his black Porsche watch. I'm due there in an hour. Get a copter back to the coast. The rig? No. Your fucking jet. Figured I handle that myself. Good. I'd go for a Dornier system ground effect plane myself. Have it wait down the road until we see Mitchell heading in. It could get here by the time the medics clean him up. We toss him in and take off for the Sonora border. At subsonic speeds? Turner said. No way. You're on your way to California to buy me that jump jet. Our boy's going out of here in a multi-mission combat aircraft that's barely even obsolete. You got a pilot in mind? Me, Turner said, and tapped the socket behind his ear. It's a fully integrated interactive system. They'll sell you the interface software, and I'll jack straight in. Didn't know you could fly. I can't. You don't need hands-on to haul ass for Mexico City. Still the wild boy, Turner.
Cannot comply.
You know the rumors that somebody blew your dick off back there in New Delhi? Conroy swung around to face him, his grin cold and clean. Turner dug the park out from behind the seat and took out the pistol and the box of ammunition. He was stuffing the parka back again when Conroy said, "Keep it. It gets cold as hell here at night." Turner reached for the canopy latch, and Conroy revved the engines.
Cannot comply.
The hovercraft rose a few centimeters, swaying slightly as Turner popped the canopy and climbed out. White-out sun and air like hot velvet. He took his Mexican sunglasses from the pocket of the blue work shirt and put them on. He wore white deck shoes and a pair of tropical combat fatigues. The box of explosive shells went into one of the thigh pockets on the fatigues. He kept the gun in his right hand, the parka bundled under his left arm. "Head for the long building," Conroy said over the engine. "They're expecting you." He jumped down into the furnace glow of desert noon as Conroy revved the Fokker again and edged it back to the highway. He watched as it sped east,
Frameshift drive
its receding
charging.
image distorted through wrinkles of rising heat. When it was gone, there was no sound at all, no movement. He turned, facing the ruin.
3, 2, 1.
Something
Engage.
small and stone gray darted between two rocks. Perhaps 80 meters from the highway, the jagged walls began. The expanse between had once been a parking lot. 5 steps forward and he stopped. He heard the sea, surf pounding, soft explosions as breakers fell. The gun was in his hand, too large, too real, its metal warming in the sun.
Warning.
No
Frameshift
sea,
drive
no sea,
operating
he told
beyond
himself.
safety limits.
Can't hear it. He walked on, the deck shoes slipping in drifts of ancient window glass seasoned with brown and green shards of bottle.
Frameshift drive charging.
There were rusted discs that had been bottle caps, flattened rectangles that had been aluminum cans. Insects whirred up from low clumps of dry brush. Over.
4,
Done with.
3, 2,
This place.
1.
No
Engage.
time. He stopped again, straining forward, as though he sought something that would help him name the thing that was rising in him. Something hollow. The mall was doubly dead. The beach hotel in
Fuel
Mexico
scooping.
had lived once, at least for a season. Beyond the parking lot, the sunlit cinder block, cheap and soulless, waiting.
Fuel scoop disengaged.
He found them crouched in the narrow strip of shade provided by a length of gray wall. 3 of them.
Frameshift drive charging.
He smelled the coffee before he saw them. The fire-blackened enamel pot balanced precariously on the tiny Primus cooker. He was meant to smell it, of course. They were expecting him. Otherwise,
4,
he'd have found the ruin
3,
empty,
2,
and then somehow,
1,
very
engage.
quietly, and almost naturally, he would have died. 2 men, a woman. Cracked, dusty boots out of Texas. Denim so shiny with grease that it would probably be waterproof. The men were bearded, their uncut hair bound up in sun-bleached top knots with lengths of
Fuel
rawhide.
scooping.
The woman's hair center-parted and pulled back tight from a seamed, wind-burned face. An ancient BMW motorcycle was propped against
Fuel
the wall,
scooping complete.
flecked chrome and battered paintwork daubed
Frameshift
with
drive
airbrush blobs
charging.
of tan and gray desert camo. He released the Smith & Wesson's grip, letting it pivot around his index finger so that the barrel pointed up and back. "Tanner," one of the men said, rising, cheap metal flashing
Frameshift
from his
drive
teeth.
charging.
Sutcliffe. Trace of an accent, probably Australian. Point team? He looked at the other 2. Point, Sutcliffe
4,
said,
3,
and probed his
2,
mouth with a tanned
1,
thumb and forefinger,
engage.
coming away with a yellowed, steel-capped prosto. His own teeth were white and perfectly even. "You took Chauvet from IBM for Mitsu," he said. "And they say you took Simonov out of Tomsk. Is that a question? I
Fuel
was
scooping.
security for IBM Marrakesh when you blew the hotel." Turner met the man's eyes. They were blue,
Fuel scooping
calm,
complete.
very bright. "Is that a problem for you?" "No fear," Sutcliffe said. "Just to say I've seen you work." He snapped the prosto back in place. "Lynch," nodding toward the other man, and Webber, toward the woman. "Run it down to me," Turner said, and lowered himself into the scrap of shade. He squatted on his haunches,
Frameshift
still
drive
holding the gun.
charging.
"We came in 3 days ago," Weber said, "on 2 bikes. We arranged for one of them to snap its crankshaft in case we had to make an excuse for camping here. There's a sparse
4,
transient
3,
population,
2,
gypsy bikers
1,
and cultists."
engage.
Lynch walked an optic spool 6 kilos east and typed into a phone. "Private." "Pay," Lynch said. "We sent out a test squirt," the woman continued. "If it hadn't worked, you'd know it." Turner nodded.
Fuel scooping.
"Incoming traffic." "Nothing. It's strictly for the big show, whatever that is." She raised her eyebrows.
Fuel scooping
"It's an
complete.
infection. Bit obvious that,"
Frameshift drive charging.
Sutcliffe said, settling himself beside Weber, his back to the wall. "Though the general tone of the operation so far suggests that we hirelings aren't likely to even know who we're extracting.
4,
True, Mr.
3,
Turner?
2,
Or will we be able to
1,
read about it in the
engage.
effects?" Turner ignored him. "Go on, Weber." "After our landline was in place, the rest of the crew filtered in, 1 or 2 at a time. The last one in primed us for the tank full of Japs." "That was raw," Sutcliffe said. "Bit too far up front."
System scan complete.
"You think it might have blown us?"
Fuel scooping.
Turner asked. Sutcliffe shrugged. "Could be. Could be no. We hopped it pretty quick. Damned lucky we'd the roof to tuck it under." "What about the passengers?"
Fuel scoop
"They
disengaged.
only come out at night," Weber said. "And they know we'll kill them if they try to get more than 5 meters away from the thing."
Frameshift drive
Turner glanced
charging.
at Sutcliffe. "Conroy's orders," the man said. "Conroy's orders don't count now," Turner said. "But that one holds. What are these people
4,
like?"
3, 2,
"Medicals,"
1, engage.
Lynch said. "Bent medicals." "You got it," Turner said. What about the rest of the crew? We rig some shade with my medic tops. They sleep in shifts. There's not enough water, and we can't risk much in the way of cooking. Sutcliffe reached for the coffee pot. We have sentries in place, and we run periodic checks on the integrity of the landline.
Frameshift drive charging.
He splashed black coffee into a plastic mug that looked as though it had been chewed by a dog. So when do we do our dance, Mr. Turner? I want to see your tank of pet medics. I want to see a command
4,
post.
3,
You haven't
2,
said anything about a
1.
command post.
Engage.
All set? Lynch said. Fine. Here. Turner passed Weber the revolver. See if you can find me some sort of rig for this. Now I want Lynch to show me these medics. He thought it would be you,
Fuel
Lynch said,
scooping.
scrambling effortlessly up a low incline of rubble. Turner followed. You've got quite a rep. The younger man glanced back at him from beneath a fringe of dirty, sun-streaked hair. Too much of one, Turner said.
Frameshift drive charging.
Any is too much. You worked with him before? Marrakesh? Lynch ducked sideways through a gap in the cinder block, and Turner was close behind. The desert plant
4,
smelled of tar.
3,
They stung and grabbed if you
1.
brushed them.
Engage.
Through a vacant, rectangular opening intended for a window, Turner glimpsed pink mountaintops. Then Lynch was loping down a slope of gravel. Sure, I worked for him before, Lynch said, pausing at the base of the slide. An ancient-looking leather belt rode low on his
Fuel
hips.
scooping.
Its heavy buckle, a tarnished silver death's head with a dorsal crest of blunt pyramidal spikes. Marrakesh. That was before my time. Connie too, Lynch?
Fuel scoop disengaged.
How's that? Conroy. You worked for him before? More to the point, are you working for him now? Turner came slowly,
Frameshift drive
deliberately
charging.
down the gravel as he spoke. It crunched and slid beneath his deck shoes' uneasy footing. He could see the delicate little Fletcher holstered beneath Lynch's denim vest. Lynch licked dry
4,
lips, held his ground.
3, 2,
That's
1.
such contact.
Engage.
I haven't met him. Conroy has this problem, Lynch. Can't delegate responsibility. He likes to have his own man from the start, someone to watch the watchers. Always. You the one, Lynch? Lynch shook his head. The absolute minimum of movement required to convey the negative.
Fuel scooping.
Turner was close enough to smell his sweat above the tarry odor of the desert plants. I've seen Conroy blow 2 extractions that way. Turner said, Lizards and broken glass, Lynch. You feel like dying here?
Fuel scoop disengaged.
Turner raised his fist in front of Lynch's face and slowly extended the index finger, pointing straight up. We're in their
System
footprint.
scan complete.
If a plant of Conroy's bleeps the least fucking pulse out of here, they'll be onto us.
Frameshift drive
If
charging.
they aren't already. That's right. Such your man. Lynch said. Not me. And I can't see it being Weber.
4,
Black-rimmed,
3,
broken nails
2,
came up to scratch
1.
abstractedly at his
Engage.
ear. Now, did you get me back here exclusively for this little talk? Or do you still want to see our can full of Japs? Let's see it. Lynch. Lynch was the one. Once, in Mexico years before, Turner had chartered a portable vacation module, solar-powered and French-built. Its 7-meter body, like a
Fuel
wingless
scooping.
housefly sculpted in polished alloy. Its eyes, twin hemispheres of tinted photosensitive plastic. He sat behind them as an
Fuel
aged
scooping
twin-prop
complete.
Russian cargo lifter lumbered down the coast with the module in its jaws, barely clearing the crowns of the tallest palms. Deposited on a remote
Frameshift
beach of
drive
black sand,
charging.
Turner spent 3 days of pampered solitude in the narrow, teak-lined cabin, microwaving food from the freezer and showering, frugally but regularly in cool, fresh water. The module's rectangular banks of cells would swivel, tracking the sun, and he'd learned to tell time by their position. Hosaka's portable neurosurgery resembled an eyeless version of that French module, perhaps 2 meters longer and painted a dull brown. Sections of perforated angle iron had been freshly brazed at intervals along the lower half of the hull and supported simple spring suspensions for 10 fat, heavily nubbed red rubber bicycle tires. They're asleep, Lynch said. It bobs around when they move so you can tell. We'll have the wheels off when the time comes. But for now,
4, 3,
we like being able to
2,
keep track of them.
1. Engage.
Turner walked slowly around the brown pod, noting the glossy black sewage tube that ran to a small rectangular tank nearby. Had to dump that last night, Jesus. Lynch shook his head. I got food and some water.
Fuel scooping.
Turner put his ear to the hull. It's proofed, Lynch said. Turner glanced up at the steel
Fuel
roof above them.
scooping complete.
The surgery was screened from above by a good 10 meters of rusting roof, sheet steel, and hot enough now to fry an egg. He nodded. That hot rectangle would be a permanent factor in the Moss infrared scan. Bats, Weber said, handing him the Smith & Wesson and a black nylon shoulder rig. The dusk was full of sounds that seemed to come from inner space. Metallic squeaks and the cackling of bugs, cries of unseen birds. Turner shoved a gun and holster into a pocket on the
drive
pocket.
charging.
You want to piss, go up by that mesquite. But watch out for the thorn. Where are you from? New Mexico,
4,
the woman said,
3, 2,
her face like carved wood in the remaining
engage.
She turned and walked away, heading for the angle of walls that sheltered the tarps. He could make out Sutcliffe and a young black man there. They were eating from dull foil envelopes. Ramirez, the on-site console jockey, Jaylene Slide's partner, out of Los Angeles. Turner looked up at the bowl of sky, limitless,
Fuel scooping.
the map of stars. Strange how it's bigger this way, he thought. And from orbit, it's just a gulf.
Fuel
formless.
scooping complete.
And scale lost all meaning. And tonight he wouldn't sleep, he knew. And the Big Dipper would whirl round for him and dive for the horizon, pulling its tail with it. A wave of
Frameshift
nausea and
drive
dislocation
charging.
hit him, as images from the Biosoft dossier swam unbidden through his mind. Chapter 8. Paris.
4, 3,
Andrea
2,
lived in the Quartier de
1.
Turn,
Engage.
where her ancient building, like the others in her street, awaited sandblasting by the city's relentless renovators. Beyond the dark entrance, one of Fuji Electric's biofluorescent strips glowed dimly, above a dilapidated wall of small wooden hutches, some with their slotted doors still intact. Marley knew that postmen had once made daily
Fuel
deposits of
scooping.
mail through those slots. There was something romantic about the idea, although the hutches, with their yellowing business cards announcing the occupations
Fuel
of long
scooping
vanished
complete.
tenants, had
Frameshift
always
drive
depressed her.
charging. Warning.
The walls of the
Temperature
hallway were
critical.
stapled with bulging loops of cable and fiber optics, each strand a potential nightmare for some hapless utilities repairman. At the far end, through an
Frameshift
open door
drive
paneled with
charging.
dusty pebble glass, was a disused courtyard, its cobbles shiny with damp. The concierge was sitting in the courtyard as Marley entered the building, on a white plastic
4,
crate that had once held
2,
bottles of Avion water.
1. Engage.
He was patiently oiling each link of an old bicycle's black chain. He glanced up as she began to climb the first flight of stairs, but registered no particular interest. The stairs were made of marble, worn dull and concave by generations of tenants. Andrea's apartment was on the 4th floor. 2 rooms, kitchen and bath. Marley had come here when she closed her gallery for the last time, when it was no longer possible to sleep in the makeshift bedroom she'd shared with Alan, the little room behind the storeroom. Now the building brought her depression circling in again, but the feel of her new outfit and the tidy click of her boot heels on marble kept it at a distance. She wore an oversized leather coat a few shades lighter than her handbag, a wool skirt, and a silk blouse from Paris Isetan. She'd had her hair cut that morning on Faubourg Saint-Honoré by a Burmese girl with a West German laser pencil. An expensive cut, subtle, without being too conservative.
Engage.
She touched the round plate bolted in the center of Andrea's door, heard it peep once, softly, as it read the whorls and ridges of her fingertips. "It's me, Andrea," she said to the tiny microphone. A series of clanks and tickings as her friend unbolted the door. Andrea stood there dripping wet in the old terry robe. She took in Marley's new look, then smiled. "Did you get your job, or have you robbed a bank?" Marley stepped in, kissing her friend's wet cheek. "It feels a bit of both," she said and laughed. "Coffee," said Andrea. "Make us coffee, grande creme. I must rinse my hair, and yours is beautiful." She went into the bathroom and Marley heard a spray of water across porcelain.
Frameshift drive charging.
"I brought you a present," Marley said, but Andrea couldn't hear her. She went into the kitchen and filled the kettle, lit the stove with the old-fashioned spark gun, and began to search the crowded shelves for coffee.
3, 2, 1. Engage.
Andrea was saying, "I do see it." She was peering into the hologram of the box Marley had first seen in Vierek's construct of Gaudi's park. "It's your sort of thing." She touched a stud and the Brown's illusion winked out. Beyond the room's single window, the sky was stippled with a few wisps of cirrus. "Too grim for me. Too serious. Like the things you showed at your gallery?
Fuel scooping.
But that can only mean that Herr Vierek has chosen
System
well.
scan complete.
You will solve this mystery for him.
Fuel scooping complete.
Considering the wage,
Frameshift
I might
drive
take my own
charging.
good time about it." Andrea wore
Frameshift
Marley's
drive
gift,
charging.
an expensive, beautifully detailed man's dress shirt in gray Flemish flannel. It was the sort of thing she liked most, and her delight in it was obvious. It set off her pale hair, and was very nearly the color of her eyes.
2, 1. Engage.
"It's quite horrible, Vierek, I think." Marley hesitated. "Quite likely," Andrea said, taking another sip of coffee. "Do you expect anyone that wealthy to be a nice, normal sort? I felt at one point that he wasn't quite human. Felt that very strongly." "But he isn't, Marley. You were talking with a projection, a special effect."
Fuel scooping.
Still, she made a gesture of helplessness, which immediately made her feel annoyed with herself. "Still, he is very, very wealthy
Fuel
and is
scooping
paying
complete.
you a great deal to do something that you may be uniquely suited to do." Andrea smiled and readjusted a finely turned charcoal cuff.
Frameshift
"You don't
drive
have a great deal
charging.
of choice, do you?" "I know. I suppose that's what's making me uneasy." "Well," Andrea said, "I thought I might put off telling you a bit longer, but
4,
I have something else that
3,
may make you
2,
feel uneasy."
1.
If
Engage.
uneasy is the word. "Yes. I considered not telling you at all, but I'm sure he'll get to you eventually. He smells money, I suppose." Marley put her empty cup down carefully on the cluttered little rattan table. "He's quite cute that way,"
System scan complete.
Andrea said. "When?" yesterday. It began, I think, about an hour after you would have had your interview with Vierick. He called me at work. He left a message here with the concierge.
Frameshift
If I were to
drive
remove the
charging.
screen program, she gestured toward the phone. I think he'd ring within 30 minutes. Remembering the concierge's eyes, the ticking of the bicycle chain.
4,
He
3,
wants to talk,
2,
he said.
1. Engage.
Andrea said. Only to talk. Do you want to talk with him, Marley? No, she said, and her voice was a little girl's voice, high and ridiculous. Then, did he leave a
Fuel
note?
scooping.
Andrea sighed, slowly shook her head, and then said, yes, of course he did. Chapter 9.
Fuel scooping complete.
Up the projects. The dark was full of honeycomb patterns the color of blood. Everything was warm,
Frameshift drive charging.
soft too. Mostly soft. What a mess, one of the angels said. Her voice far off but low and rich and very clear.
4, 3, 2,
We should have clipped him out of
1.
Leon's,
Engage.
the other angel said. They aren't gonna like this upstairs. Must have had something in this big pocket here, see? They slashed it for him, getting it out. Not all they slashed, sister. Jesus. Here. The pattern swung and swam as something moved his head. Cool palm against his cheek.
Fuel scooping.
Don't get any on your shirt, the first angel said. 2 a day ain't gonna like this.
Fuel scooping complete.
Why you figure he freaked like that and ran? It pissed him off because he wanted to sleep. He was asleep for sure, but somehow Marcia's Jack dreams were bleeding into his head, so that he tumbled through broken sequences of people of importance. The soap had been running continuously since before he was born. The plot, a multi-headed narrative tapeworm that coiled back in to devour itself every few months, then sprouted new heads hungry for tension and thrust. He could see it writhing in its totality, the way Marcia could never see it,
Frameshift drive charging.
an elongated spiral of SenseNet DNA. Cheap, brittle ectoplasm spun out to uncounted hungry dreamers. Marcia now, she had it from the POV of Michelle Morgan Magnum, the
4,
female lead,
3,
hereditary
2,
corporate head of Magnum
1.
AG.
Engage.
But today's episode kept veering weirdly away from Michelle's frantically complex romantic entanglements, which Bobby had anyway never bothered to keep track of, and jerking itself into detailed socio-architectural descriptions of Solari-style Mincome arcologies. Some of the detail, even to Bobby, seemed suspect. He doubted, for instance, that there really were entire levels devoted to the sale of ice blue shaved velour lounge suites with diamond-buckled knees, or that there were other levels, perpetually dark, inhabited exclusively by starving babies. This last, he seemed to recall, had been an article of faith to Marcia, who regarded the projects with superstitious horror, as though they were some looming vertical hell to which she might one day be forced to ascend. Other segments of the Jack Dream reminded him of the Knowledge Channel SenseNet piped in free with every Stim subscription. There were elaborate animated diagrams of the project's interior structure and droning lectures and voiceover on the lifestyles of various types of residents. These, when he was able to focus on them, seemed even less convincing than the flashes of ice blue velour and feral babies creeping silently through the dark. He watched a cheerful young mother slice pizza with a huge industrial water knife in the kitchen corner of a spotless one-room. An entire wall opened onto a shallow balcony and a rectangle of cartoon blue sky. The woman was black without being black, it seemed to Bobby, like a very, very dark and youthfully maternal version of one of the porno dolls on the unit in his bedroom, and had, it looked like, the identical small but cartoon-perfect breasts. At this point, to add to his dull confusion, an astonishingly loud and very unnet voice said, "Now I call that a definite sign of life, Jackie. If the prognosis ain't looking up yet, at least something is." And then went spinning back into the all-glitz universe of Michelle Morgan Magnum, who was desperately struggling to prevent Magnum AG's takeover by the sinister Shikoku-based Nakamura industrial clan, represented in this case by, plot complication, Michelle's main squeeze for the season. Wealthy, but somehow grindingly in need of additional billions, new Soviet boy politician Vasily Suslov, who looked and dressed remarkably like the Gothics in Leon's. The episode seemed to be reaching some sort of climax. An antique BMW fuel cell conversion had just been strafed by servo-piloted miniature West German helicopters on the street below Kobina Concourse Courts. Michelle Morgan Magnum was pistol whipping her treacherous personal secretary with a nickel-plated Nambu, and Suslov, who Bobby was coming increasingly to identify with, was casually preparing to get his ass out of town with a gorgeous female bodyguard who was Japanese but reminded Bobby intensely of another one of the dream girls on his holoporn unit. When someone screamed.
4,
Bobby
3,
had never heard
2,
anyone scream
1.
that way,
Engage.
and there was something horribly familiar about the voice. But before he could start to worry about it, those blood-red honeycombs came swirling in again and made him miss the end of people of importance. Still, some part of him thought,
Fuel
as
scooping.
red went to black, he could always ask Marcia how it came out. Open your eyes, man. That's it. Light too bright for you? It was, but it didn't change. White.
Fuel scooping complete.
White. He remembered his head exploding years away. Pure white grenade in that cool wind desert dark. His eyes were open, but he couldn't see. Just white. Now, I'd leave you down
Frame shift
ordinarily,
drive
for ordinary
charging.
condition. But the people paying me for this say get a jump on. So I'm waking you up before I'm done. You're wondering why you can't see shit, right?
4,
Just light, that's all you
3,
can see. That's
2,
right.
1.
What we got here is a neural cutout. Now, between you and me, this thing come out of a sex shop, but there's no reason not to use it in medicine if we want to. And we do want to because you're still hurting bad. And anyway, it keeps you still while I get on with it. The voice was calm and methodical.
Fuel
Now, your
scooping.
big problem, that was your back, but I took care of that with a stapler and a few feet of claw.
Fuel scooping complete.
You don't get any plastic work here, you understand? But the honeys will think those scars are real interesting. What I'm doing now is I'm cleaning this one on your chest, then I'll zip a little claw down that, and we're all done, except you better move easy for a couple of days or you'll pull a staple. I got a couple of derms on you,
Frame
and I'll
shift
stick on a
drive
few
charging.
more. Meantime, I'm gonna click your sensorium up to audio and full visual so you can get into being here. Don't mind the blood. It's all yours,
4,
but
3,
there isn't any more
2,
coming.
1. Engage.
White, curdled to gray cloud. Objects taking form with the slow deliberation of a dust vision. He was flat against a padded ceiling, staring straight down at a blood-stained white doll that had no head at all, only a greenish-blue surgical lamp that seemed to sprout from its shoulders. A black man in a stained green smock was spraying something yellow into a shallow gash that ran diagonally from just above the doll's pelvic bone to just below its left nipple. He knew the man was black because his head was bare and shaven, slick with sweat. His hands were covered in tight green gloves, and all that Bobby could see of him was the gleaming crown of his head. There were pink and blue dermadiscs stuck to the skin on either side of the doll's neck. The edges of the wound seemed to have been painted with something that looked like
4,
chocolate
3,
syrup,
2,
and the yellow
1.
spray made a hissing
Engage.
sound as it escaped from its little silver tube. Then Bobby got the picture, and the universe reversed itself sickeningly. The lamp was suspended from the ceiling was mirrored, and he was the doll.
Fuel scooping.
He seemed to snap back on a long elastic cord, back through the red honeycombs, to the dream room where the
Fuel
black
scoop
girl sliced
disengaged.
pizza for her children. The water knife made no sound at all. Microscopic grit suspended in a needle stream of high-speed water. The thing was
Frameshift
intended to
drive
cut glass
charging.
and alloy, Bobby knew, not to slice microwaved pizza. And he wanted to scream at her because he was terrified she'd take off her thumb without even feeling it. But he couldn't scream,
4, 3,
couldn't move or
2,
make a sound at all.
1. Engage.
She lovingly sliced the last piece, toed the kick plate that shut the knife down, transferred the sliced pizza to a plain white ceramic platter, then turned toward the rectangle of blue beyond the balcony where her children were. No, Bobby said, way down in himself. No way. Because the things that wheeled and plunged for her weren't hang-gliding kids, but babies. The monstrous babies of Marcia's dream. And the
Fuel
tattered
scoop
wings,
disengaged.
a confusion of pink bone, metal, patched, taut membranes of scrap plastic. He saw their teeth. Whoa, said the black man. Lost you for a second. Not for long, you understand? Just maybe a New York minute. His hand in the mirrors overhead took a flat spool of blue transparent plastic from the bloody cloth beside Bobby's ribs. Delicately, with thumb and forefinger, he drew out a length of some sort of brown, beaded plastic. Minute points of light flashed along its edges and seemed to quiver and shift. Claw, he said, and with his other hand
4,
thumbed some
3,
sort of
2,
integral
1.
cutter in the sealed blue
Engage.
spool. Now the length of beaded stuff swung free and began to writhe. Good shit, he said, bringing the thing into Bobby's line of sight. New. What they use in Chiba now. It was
Fuel
brown,
scooping.
headless, each bead a body segment. Each segment edged with pale, shining legs. Then, with a conjurer's flick of his green-gloved
Fuel
wrist,
scoop
he laid a
disengaged.
centipede down the length of the open wound and pinched delicately at the final segment, the one nearest Bobby's face. As the segment came away, it withdrew a glittering black thread that had served the thing as a nervous system. And as that went, each set of
Frameshift
claws
drive
locked shut
charging.
in turn, zipping the slash tight as a new leather jacket. Now, you see, said the black man, mopping the last of the brown syrup away with a wet white pad.
4, 3,
That wasn't
2,
so bad.
1. Engage.
His entrance to Two-A-Day's apartment wasn't anything like the way he'd so often imagined it. To begin with, he'd never imagined being wheeled in a wheelchair that someone had appropriated from St. Mary's maternity. The name and a serial number neatly laser-etched on the dull chrome of the left armrest. The woman who was wheeling him would have fitted neatly enough into one of his fantasies. Her name was Jackie. One of the two project girls he'd seen at Leon's. And, he'd come to understand, one of his two angels.
Fuel scoop disengaged.
The wheelchair was silent as it glided across the scabrous gray wall-to-wall of the apartment's narrow entranceway. But the gold bangles on Jackie's fedora tinkled cheerfully as she pushed him along. And he'd never imagined that Two-A-Day's place would be quite this large, or that it would be full of trees. Pi, the doctor who'd been careful to explain that he wasn't a doctor, just someone who helped out sometimes, had settled back on a torn bar stool in his makeshift surgery, peeled off his bloody green gloves, lit a menthol cigarette, and solemnly advised Bobby to take it real easy for the next week or so. Minutes later, Jackie and Rhea, the other angel, had wrestled him into a pair of wrinkled black pajamas that looked like something out of a very cheap ninja kino,
Frameshift
deposited
drive
him in the
charging.
wheelchair, and set out for the central stem of elevators at the Arcology's core. Thanks to an additional 3 dirhams from Pi's store of drugs, one of them charged with a good 2,000 mics of endorphin analog,
4,
Bobby
3,
was alert and
2,
feeling no pain.
1. Engage.
"Where's my stuff?" he protested, as they rolled him out into a corridor grown perilously narrow with decades of retrofitted ducts and plumbing. "Where's my clothes and my deck and everything?"
Your clothes, hon, such as they were, are taped up in a plastic bag waiting
Fuel
for Pi to
scooping.
shit can.
System scan complete.
Pi had to cut 'em off you on the slab, and they weren't but bloody rags to begin with. If your deck was in your jacket down the back, I'd say the boys who chopped you out
Fuel
got
scooping complete.
damn near got you in the
Frameshift drive
process.
charging.
And you ruined my Sally Stanley shirt, you little shithead.
Angel Rhea didn't seem too friendly. "Oh," Bobby said as they rounded a corner.
4,
Right.
3, 2.
Well,
1.
did you happen to
Engage.
find a screwdriver in there? Or a credit chip? No chip, baby. But if the screwdriver's the one with the 210 new ones screwed into the handle, that's the price of my new shirt. Two-A-Day didn't look as though he was particularly glad to see Bobby. In fact,
Fuel scooping.
it almost seemed as if he didn't see him at all. Looked straight through him to Jackie and Rhea, and showed his teeth in a smile that was all nerves and sleep-like.
Fuel
They
scoop
wheeled Bobby close
disengaged.
enough that he saw how yellow Two-A-Day's eyeballs looked, almost orange in the pinky purple glow of the grow light tubes that seemed to dangle at random from the ceiling. "What took you bitches?" the wereman asked, but there was no
Frameshift
anger in his
drive
voice,
charging.
only bone weariness and something else, something Bobby couldn't identify at first.
Pi,
Jackie said, swaggering past the wheelchair to take a package of Chinese cigarettes from the enormous wooden slab that served Two-A-Day as a coffee table.
he's a perfectionist, old Pi. Learned that in vet school.
Rhea added for Bobby's benefit.
Except usually he's too
4,
wasted.
3,
Nobody
2,
let him work on a dog.
1. Engage.
Two-A-Day said, and finally let his eyes rest on Bobby. "You're gonna make it." And his eyes were so cold, so tired and clinical, so far removed from the hustling manic bullshitter's act that Bobby had taken for the
Fuel
man's
scooping.
personality, that Bobby could only lower his own eyes, face burning, and lock his gaze on the table. Nearly 3 meters long and slightly
Fuel
over a
scooping
meter
complete.
wide, it was strapped together from timbers thicker than Bobby's thigh. It must have been in the water once, he thought. Sections still retained the bleached silvery patina of driftwood, like the log he remembered playing beside a long time ago in Atlantic City. But it hadn't seen water for a long time, and the top was a
Frameshift
dense
drive
mosaic of
charging.
candle drippings, wine stains, oddly shaped overspray marks in matte black enamel, and the dark burns left by hundreds of cigarettes. It was so crowded with food, garbage, and gadgets that it looked as though some street vendor had set up to unload hardware,
Engage.
then decided to have dinner. There were half-eaten pizzas, krill balls and red sauce, and Bobby's stomach began to churn, beside cascading stacks of software, smudged glasses with cigarettes crushed out in purple wine dregs, a pink styrene tray with neat rows of stale-looking canapes, open and unopened cans of beer, an antique Gerber combat dagger that lay unsheathed on a flat block of polished marble, at least 3 pistols, and perhaps 24 pieces of cryptic-looking console gear, the kind of cowboy equipment that ordinarily would have made Bobby's mouth water. Now his mouth was watering for a slice of cold krill pizza. But his hunger was nothing in the face of his abrupt humiliation at seeing that Two-A-Day just didn't care. Not that Bobby had thought of him as a friend exactly, but he definitely had something invested in the idea that Two-A-Day saw him as somebody with talent and initiative and a chance of getting out of Barrytown. But Two-A-Day's eyes told him he was nobody in particular, and a Wilson at that. Look here, my man. Someone said, not Two-A-Day, and Bobby looked up. 2 other men flanked Two-A-Day on the fat chrome and leather couch, both of them black. The one who'd spoken wore a gray robe of some kind and antique plastic-framed glasses. The frames were square and oversized and seemed to lack lenses. The other man's shoulders were twice as wide as Two-A-Day's, but he wore the kind of plain black 2-piece suit he saw in Japanese businessmen in kinos. His spotless white French cuffs were closed with bright rectangles of gold microcircuitry. It's a shame we can't let you have some downtime to heal up, the first man said. But we have a bad problem here. He paused, removed his glasses, and massaged the bridge of his nose. We require your help. Shit, Two-A-Day said. He leaned forward, took a Chinese cigarette from the pack on the table, lit it with a dull pewter skull the size of a large lemon, then reached for a glass of wine. The man with the glasses extended a lean brown forefinger and touched Two-A-Day's wrist. Two-A-Day released the glass and sat back, his face carefully blank. The man smiled at Bobby. Count 0, he said. They tell us that's your hand.
3, 2, 1, engage.
That's right. Bobby managed, though it came out as a kind of croak. We need to know about the Virgin, Count. The man waited. Bobby blinked at him. Vierge Miracle. And the glasses went back on. Our Lady, Virgin of Miracle. We know her. And he made a sign with his left hand. As Ezilifreda.
Fuel scooping complete.
Bobby became aware of the fact that his mouth was open, so he closed it. The 3 dark faces waited. Jackie and Rhea were gone, but he hadn't seen them leave. Kind of panic took him then, and he glanced frantically around at the strange forest of stunted trees that surrounded them. The grow light tube slanted at every angle, in any direction. Pink-purple jackstraws suspended in a green space of leaves. No walls.
4, 3,
You couldn't see a wall at all.
1, engage.
The couch and the battered table sat in a sort of clearing, with a floor of raw concrete. We know she came to you, the big man said, crossing his legs carefully. He adjusted a perfect trouser crease, and a gold cufflink winked at Bobby. We know. You understand? Two-A-Day tells me it was your first run, the other man said. That the truth? Bobby nodded. Then you are chosen of Legbar. The man said again, removing the empty frames. To have met Vierge Miracle. He smiled. Bobby's mouth was open again. Legbar, the man said. Master of roads and pathways. The lower of communication.
Two-a-day ground his cigarette out on the scarred wood, and
Frameshift
Bobby
drive
saw that his
charging.
hand was shaking. Chapter 10. Alan. They agreed to meet in the brasserie on the 5th sublevel of the Napoleon
3,
Court Complex,
2, 1.
beneath the Louvre's
Engage.
glass pyramid. It was a place they both knew, although it had had no particular meaning for them. Alan had suggested it, and she suspected him of having chosen it carefully. It was neutral emotional ground, a familiar setting, yet one that was free of memories. It was decorated in a style that dated from the turn of the century. Granite counters, black floor-to-ceiling beams, wall-to-wall
Fuel
mirror,
disengaged.
and a sort of Italian restaurant furniture in dark welded steel that might have belonged to any decade of the past 100 years. The tables were covered in gray linen with a fine black stripe, a pattern picked up and repeated in the menu
Frameshift drive
cards and
charging.
matchbooks on the aprons of the waiters. She wore the leather coat she'd bought in Brussels, a red linen blouse, and new black cotton jeans. Andrea had pretended not to notice the extreme
4,
care with which he
3,
dressed for the
2,
meeting,
1.
and then had loaned her a
Engage.
simple single strand of pearls, which set off the red blouse perfectly. He'd come early, she saw as she entered, and already the table was littered with his things. He wore his favorite scarf, the one they'd found together at the flea market the year before, and looked, as he usually
Fuel
did,
scooping.
disheveled but perfectly at ease. The tattered leather attaché case had disgorged its contents across the little square of polished granite. Spiral notebooks, an unread copy of the month's controversial novel,
Fuel scoop disengaged.
Gauloise non-filters, a box of wooden matches, the leather-bound agenda she'd bought for him at Brown's.
Frameshift drive charging.
"I thought you might not come," he said, smiling up at her. "Why would you have thought that?" she asked. A random response, pathetic, she thought,
4,
masking the
3,
terror she now
2,
felt, that she
1.
allowed herself at
Engage.
last to feel, which was fear of some loss of self, of will and direction, fear of the love she still felt. She took the other chair and seated herself as the young waiter arrived, a Spanish boy in a striped apron, to take her order. She asked for Vichy water. "Nothing else?"
Fuel scooping.
Alan asked. The waiter hovered. "No, thank you. I've been trying to reach you for weeks," he
Fuel
said,
scoop
and
disengaged.
she knew that that was a lie, and yet, as she
Frameshift
often had
drive
before,
charging.
she wondered if he was entirely conscious of the fact that he was lying. Andrea maintained that men like Alan lied so constantly, so passionately, that some basic distinction had been lost.
4, 3.
They were
2,
artists in their own
1.
right, Andrea said, intent on restructuring reality. And the New Jerusalem was a fine place indeed, free of overdrafts and disgruntled landlords and the need to find someone to cover the evening's bill. "I didn't notice you trying to reach me when Nas came with the police," she said,
Fuel scooping.
hoping at least that he would wince. But the boyish face was calm as ever. Beneath clean brown hair, he habitually combed back with his fingers.
Fuel scooping complete.
"I'm sorry," he said, crushing out his Gauloise. Because she'd come to associate the smell of the dark French tobacco with him, Paris had seemed full of his scent, his ghost, his trail. I was certain he'd never detect the nature of the piece. You must understand, once I had admitted to myself how badly we needed the money, I knew that I must act. You, I knew, were far too idealistic. The Galerie would have folded in any case, if things had gone as planned with Nas. We would be there now, and you would be happy. Happy, he repeated, taking another cigarette from the pack. She could only stare at him, feeling a kind of wonder and a sick revulsion at her desire to believe him. "You know," he said, taking a match from the red and yellow box, I've had difficulties with the police before. When I was a student. Politics, of course. He struck the match, tossed the box down, and lit the cigarette. Politics, she said, and suddenly felt like laughing. I was unaware that there was a party for people like you. I can't imagine what it might be called. Marley, he said, lowering his voice, as he always did when he wished to indicate intensity of feeling. You know, you must know that I acted for you. For us, if you will. But surely you know, you can feel, Marley, that I would never deliberately hurt you or place you in jeopardy. There was no room on the crowded little table for her purse, so she'd held it in her lap. Now she was aware of her nails buried deep in the soft, thick leather. Never hurt me. The voice was her own, lost and amazed. The voice of a child, and suddenly she was free. Free of need, desire, free of fear, and all that she felt for the handsome face across the table was simple revulsion. And she could only stare at him, this stranger she'd slept beside for 1 year, in a tiny room behind a very small gallery in the Rue Mauconseil. The waiter put a glass of Vichy down in front of her. He must have taken her silence for the beginning of acceptance, the utter blankness of her expression for openness. What you don't understand? This, she remembered, was a favorite opening. Is that men like us exist, in some sense, to support the arts, to support us, Marley. He smiled then, as though he laughed at himself. A jaunty, conspiratorial smile that chilled her now. I suppose, though, that I should have credited the man with having at least the requisite sense to hire his own Cornell expert, although my Cornell expert, I assure you, was by far the more erudite of the two. How was she to get away? Stand, she told herself. Turn. Walk calmly back to the entrance. Step through the door.
Heat sink deployed.
Out into the subdued glitter of Napoleon Court, where polished marble overlay the Rue du Champ-Fleury, a 14th century street said to have been reserved primarily for prostitution. Anything, only go, only leave now. And be away from him, walking blind to lose herself in the guidebook Paris she'd learned when she'd first come here. But now, he was saying, you can see that things have worked out for the best. It's often like that, isn't it? Again the smile, but this time it was boyish, slightly wistful, and somehow horribly more intimate. We've lost the gallery, but you've found employment, Marley. You've had a job to do, an interesting one. And I have the connections you'll need, Marley. I know the people you'll need to meet in order to find your artist.
Landing gear deployed.
My artist? Covering her abrupt confusion with a sip of Vichy, he opened his scarred attaché and removed something flat. A simple reflection hologram. She took it, grateful to have something to do with her hands, and saw that it was a casual shot of the box she'd seen in Villac's Construct of Barcelona. Someone was holding it forward. A man's hand, not Alan's, and on one of them, a signet ring of some dark metal. The background was lost, only the box and the hands. Alan, she said, where did you get this? Looking up to meet brown eyes filled with a terrible, childlike triumph. It's going to cost someone a very great deal to find out. He ground out a cigarette and stood. Excuse me. He walked away, headed in the direction of the restrooms. As he vanished behind mirrors and black steel beams, she dropped the hologram, reached across the table, and flipped back the lid of his attaché. There was nothing there, only a blue elastic band and some crumbs of tobacco. May I bring you something else? More Vichy, perhaps? The waiter stood beside her. She looked up at him, struck suddenly by a sense of familiarity. The lean, dark face. He's wearing a broadcast uniform, the waiter said. He's armed as well. I was the bellman in Brussels. Give him what he wants. Remember that the money means nothing to you. He took her glass and placed it carefully on his tray. And very likely it will destroy him. When Alan returned, he was smiling. Now, darling, he said, reaching for his cigarettes, we can do business. Marley smiled back and nodded. Chapter 11. On site. He allowed himself 3 hours of sleep finally, in the windowless bunker where the point team had established the command post. He'd met the rest of the site team. Ramirez was slight, nervous, perpetually wired on his own skill as a console jockey. They were depending on him, along with Jaylene Slide on the offshore rig, to monitor cyberspace around the grid sector that held the heavily iced banks of Moss Biolabs. If Moss became aware of them, at the last moment, he might be able to provide some warning. He was also charged with relaying the medical data from the surgery to the offshore rig, a complex procedure if they were to keep it from Moss. The line out ran to a phone booth in the middle of nowhere. Once past that booth, he and Jaylene were on their own in the Matrix. If they blew it, Moss could backtrack and pinpoint the site. And then there was Nathan, the repairman, whose real job consisted of watching over the gear in the bunker. If some part of their system went down, there was at least a chance he could fix it. Nathan belonged to the species that had produced Oki and 1,000 others Turner had worked with over the years, maverick techs who liked earning danger money and had proven they could keep their mouths shut. The others, Compton, Teddy, Costa, and Davis, were just expensive muscle. Mercs. The sort of men you hired for a job like this. For their benefit, he'd taken particular care in questioning Sutcliffe about the arrangements for clear-out. He'd explained where the copters would come in, the order of pickup, and precisely how and when they would be paid. Then he'd told them to leave him alone in the bunker and ordered Weber to wake him in 3 hours. The place had been either a pump house or some sort of nexus for electrical wiring. The stumps of plastic tubing that protruded from the walls might have been conduit or sewage line. The room provided no evidence that any of them had ever been connected to anything. The ceiling, a single slab of poured concrete, was too low to allow him to stand, and there was a dry, dusty smell that wasn't entirely unpleasant. The team had swept the place before they brought in the tables and the equipment, but there was still a few yellow flakes of newsprint on the floor that crumbled when he touched them. He made out letters, sometimes an entire word. Each of the folding metal camp tables had been set up along a wall, forming an L, each arm supporting an array of extraordinarily sophisticated communications gear, the best he thought that Hosaka had been able to obtain. He hunched his way carefully along the length of each table, tapping each console, each black box, lightly as he went. There was a heavily modified military sideband transceiver, rigged for squirt transmission. This would be their link in case Ramirez and Jaylene flubbed the data transfer. The squirts were pre-recorded elaborate technical fictions, encoded by Hosaka's cryptographers. The content of a given squirt was meaningless, but the sequence in which they were broadcast would convey simple messages. Sequence BCA would inform Hosaka of Mitchell's arrival. FD would indicate his departure from the site, while FG would signal his death and the concurrent closure of the operation. Turner tapped the sideband rig again, frowning. He wasn't pleased with Sutcliffe's arrangements there. If the extraction was blown, it wasn't likely they'd get out, let alone get out clean. And Weber had quietly informed him that, in the event of trouble, she'd been ordered to use a handheld anti-tank rocket on the medicals in their miniature surgery. "They know," she said. "You can bet they're getting paid for it, too." The rest of them were depending on the helicopters, which were based near Tucson. Turner assumed that Moss, if alerted, would easily take them out as they came in. When he'd objected to Sutcliffe, the Australian had only shrugged. "It isn't the way I'd set it up under the best circumstances, mate. But we're all in here on short notice, aren't we?" Beside the transceiver was an elaborate Sony biomonitor, linked directly with the surgical pod and charged with the medical history recorded in Mitchell's Biosoft dossier. The medicals, when the time came, would access the defector's history. Simultaneously, the procedures they carried out in the pod would be fed back to the Sony and collated, ready for Ramirez to ice them and shift them out into cyberspace, where Jaylene Slide would be riding shotgun from her seat in the oil rig. If it all went smoothly, the medical update would be waiting in Hosaka's Mexico City compound when Turner brought him in the jet. Turner had never seen anything quite like the Sony, but he supposed the Dutchman would have had something very similar in his Singapore clinic. The thought brought his hand to his bare chest, where he unconsciously traced the vanished line of a graft scar. The second table supported the cyberspace gear. The deck was identical with the one he'd seen on the oil rig, a Moss Neotech prototype. The deck configuration was standard, but Conroy had said that it was built up from the new biochips. There was a fist-sized lump of pale pink plastique squashed on top of the console. Someone, perhaps Ramirez, had thumbed in twin depressions for eyes and a crude curve of idiot grin. 2 wires, one blue, the other yellow, ran from the thing's pink forehead to one of the black gaping tubes that protruded from the wall behind the console. Another of Weber's chores, if there seemed any danger of the site being overrun. Turner eyed the wires, frowning. A charge that size, in that small enclosed space, guaranteed death for anyone in the bunker. His shoulders aching, the back of his head brushing the rough concrete of the ceiling, he continued his inspection. The rest of the table was taken up with the deck's peripherals, a series of black boxes positioned with obsessive precision. He suspected that each unit was a certain specific distance from its neighbor, and they were perfectly aligned. Ramirez himself would have set them out, and Turner was certain that if he touched one, moved it the least fraction, the jockey would know. He'd seen that same neurotic touch before in other console men, and it told him nothing about Ramirez. He'd watched other jockeys who reversed the trait, deliberately tangling their gear in a rat's nest of leads and cables, who were terrified of tidiness and plastered their consoles with decals of dice and screaming skulls. There was no way to tell, he thought. Either Ramirez was good, or else they all might be dead soon. At the far end of the table were 5 Telefunken ear-bead transceivers with adhesive throat mics, still sealed in individual bubble packs. During the crucial phase of the defection, which Turner took to be the 20 minutes of either side of Mitchell's arrival, he, Ramirez, Sutcliffe, Weber, and Lynch would be linked, although the use of the transceivers was to be kept to an absolute minimum. Behind the Telefunkens was an unmarked plastic carton that contained 20 Swedish catalytic hand warmers, smooth, flat oblongs of stainless steel, each in its own drawstring bag of Christmas red flannelette.
"You're a clever bastard," he said to the carton. I might have thought that one up myself. He slept on a corrugated foam hiker's pad on the floor of the command post, using the parka as a blanket. Conroy had been right about the desert night, but the concrete seemed to hold the day's heat. He left his fatigues and shoes on. Weber had advised him to shake his shoes and clothing out whenever he dressed. Scorpions, she'd say. They like sweat, any kind of moisture. He removed the Smith & Wesson from the nylon holster before he lay down, carefully positioning it beside the foam pad. He left the 2 battery lanterns on and closed his eyes, and slid into a shallow sea of dream, images tossing past, fragments of Mitchell's dossier melding with bits of his own life. He and Mitchell drove a bus through a cascade of plate glass into the lobby of a Marrakesh hotel. The scientist whooped as he pressed the button that detonated the 24 canisters of CN taped along the flanks of the vehicle. And Oki was there too, offering him whiskey from a bottle and yellow Peruvian cocaine on a round plastic-rimmed mirror he'd last seen in Allison's purse. He thought he saw Allison somewhere beyond the windows of the bus, choking in the clouds of gas, and he tried to tell Oki, tried to point her out, but the glass was plastered with Mexican holograms of saints, postcards of the Virgin, and Oki was holding up something smooth and round, a globe of pink crystal, and he saw a spider crouched at its core, a spider made of quicksilver. But Mitchell was laughing, his teeth full of blood, and extending his open palm to offer Turner the gray Biosoft. Turner saw that the dossier was a brain, grayish pink and alive beneath a wet, clear membrane, pulsing softly in Mitchell's hand. And then he tumbled over some submarine ledge of dream and settled smoothly down into a night with no stars at all. Weber woke him, her hard features framed in the square doorway, her shoulders draped in the heavy military blanket taped across the entrance. Got your 3 hours. The medicals are up if you want to talk to them. She withdrew, her boots crunching gravel. Osaka's medics were waiting beside the self-contained neurosurgery. Under a desert dawn, they looked as though they'd just stepped from some kind of matter transmitter in their fashionably rumpled Ginza casuals. One of the men was bundled in an oversized Mexican hand-knit, the sort of belted cardigan Turner had seen tourists wear in Mexico City. The other 2 wore expensive-looking insulated ski jackets against the desert coat. The men were a head shorter than the Korean, a slender woman with strong archaic features and a bird-like ruff of red-tinged hair that made Turner think of raptors. Conroy had said that the 2 were company men, and Turner could see it easily. Only the woman had the attitude, the stance that belonged to Turner's world, and she was an outlaw, a black medic. She'd be right at home with the Dutchman, he thought. I'm Turner, he said. I'm in charge here. You don't need our names, the woman said as the 2 Osaka men bowed automatically. They exchanged glances, looked at Turner, then looked back to the Korean. No, Turner said. It isn't necessary. Why are we still denied access to the patient's medical data? The Korean asked. Security, Turner said. The answer, very nearly an automatic response. In fact, he could see no reason to prevent them from studying Mitchell's records. The woman shrugged, turned away, her face hidden by the upturned collar of her insulated jacket. Would you like to inspect the surgery? The man in the bulky cardigan asked, his face polite and alert. A perfect corporate mask. No, Turner said. We'll be moving you out to the lot 20 minutes prior to his arrival. We'll take the wheels off, level you with jacks. The sewage link will be disconnected. I want you fully operational 5 minutes after we set you down. There will be no problem, the other man said, smiling. Now I want you to tell me what you're going to be doing in there, what you'll do to him and how it might affect him.
You don't know?
The woman asked sharply, turning back to face him. I said that I wanted you to tell me. Turner said,
We'll conduct an immediate scan for lethal implants.
the man in the cardigan said. Cortex charges, that sort of thing?
I doubt, said the other man, that we will encounter anything so crude, but yes, we will be scanning for the full range of lethal devices. Simultaneously, we'll run a full blood screen. We understand that his current employers deal in extremely sophisticated biochemical systems. It would seem possible that the greatest danger would lie in that direction. It's currently quite fashionable to equip top employees with modified insulin pump subdermals.
His partner broke in.
The subject system can be tricked into an artificial reliance on certain synthetic enzyme analogs. Unless the subdermal is recharged at regular intervals, withdrawal from the source, the employer, can result in trauma. We are prepared to deal with that as well, said the other. Neither of you are even remotely prepared to deal with what I suspect we will encounter.
The black medic said, her voice as cold as the wind that blew out of the east. Turner heard sand hissing across the rusted sheet of steel above them. You, Turner said, come with me. Then he turned without looking back and walked away. It was possible that she might not obey his command, in which case he'd lose face with the other two, but it seemed the right move. When he was 10 meters from the surgery pod, he halted. He heard her feet on the ground. What do you know? He asked without turning.
Perhaps no more than you, she said. Perhaps more.
More than your colleagues, obviously.
They are extremely talented men. They are also servants.
And you are not.
Neither are you, Mercy. I was hired out of the finest unlicensed clinic in Chiba for this. I was given a great deal of material to study in preparation for my meeting with this illustrious patient. The black clinics of Chiba are the cutting edge of medicine. Not even Hosaka would know that my position in black medicine would allow me to guess what it is that your defector carries in his head. The street tries to find its own uses for things, Mr. Turner. Already several times I've been hired to attempt the removal of these new implants. A certain amount of advanced mass biocircuitry has found its way into the market. These attempts at implanting are a logical step. I suspect Mars may leak these things deliberately.
Then explain it to me.
I don't think I could, she said. And there was a strange hint of resignation in her voice. I told you I've seen it. I didn't say that I understood it.
Fingertips suddenly brushed the skin beside his skull jacket.
This, compared with biochip implants, is like a wooden staff beside a myoelectric limb.
But will it be life-threatening in this case?
Oh no, she said,
withdrawing her hand.
Not for him.
And then he heard her trudging back toward the surgery. Conroy sent a runner in with a software package that would allow Turner to pilot the jet that would carry Mitchell to Hosaka's Mexico City compound. The runner was a wild-eyed, sun-blackened man Lynch called Harry, a rope-muscled apparition who came cycling in from the direction of Tucson on a sand-scoured bike with balding lug tires and bone-yellow rawhide laced around its handlebars. Lynch led Harry across the parking lot. Harry was singing to himself, a strange sound in the enforced quiet of the sand. And his song, if you could call it that,
was like someone randomly tuning a broken radio up and down midnight miles of dial, bringing in gospel shouts and snatches of 20 years of international pop. Harry had his bike slung across one burnt, bird-thin shoulder. Harry's got something for you from Tucson. Lynch said. You two know each other? Turner asked, looking at Lynch. Maybe have a friend in common? What's that supposed to mean? Lynch asked. Turner held his stare. You know his name? He told me his fucking name, Turner. Name's Harry, the burnt man said. He tossed the bicycle down on a clump of brush. He smiled vacantly, exposing badly spaced eroded teeth. His bare chest was filmed with sweat and dust, and hung with loops of fine steel chain, rawhide, bits of animal horn and fur, brass cartridge casings, copper coins worn smooth and faceless with use, and a small pouch made of soft brown leather. Turner looked at the assortment of things strung across the skinny chest and reached out, flipping a crooked bit of bent gristle, suspended from a length of braided string. What the hell is that, Harry? That's a coon's pecker, Harry said. Coon's got him a jointed bone in his pecker. Not many know that. You ever meet my friend Lynch before, Harry? Harry blinked. He had the passwords. Lynch said, there's an urgency hierarchy. He knew the top. He told me his name. Do you need me here, or can I get back to work? Go, Turner said. When Lynch was out of earshot, Harry began to work the thongs that sealed the leather pouch. You shouldn't be hard on the boy, he said. He's really very good. I actually didn't see him until he had that Fletcher up against my neck. He opened the pouch and fished delicately inside. Tell Conroy I've got him pegged. Sorry? Harry said, extracting a folded sheet of yellow notebook paper from his pouch. You got who pegged? He handed it to Turner. There was something inside. Lynch. He's Conroy's bumboy in the sight, tell him. He unfolded the paper and removed the fat military microscope. There was a note in blue capitals. Break a leg, asshole. See you in the DA. You really want me to tell him that? Tell him. You're the boss. Fucking no. Turner said, crumpling the paper and thrusting it into Harry's left armpit. Harry smiled, sweetly and vacant. And the intelligence that risen in him settled again, aquatic youth, sinking effortlessly down into a smooth sea of sun-addled activity. Turner stared into his eyes, brown, yellow gold. I saw nothing there but sun and broken earth. A hand with missing joints came up to scratch absently over his broken beard. Now, Turner said. Harry turned, pulled his bike up from the tangle of brush, shouldered it with a grunt, and began to make his way back across the ruined parking lot. His oversized, tattered khaki shorts flapped as he went, and his collection of chains rattled somewhat. Sutcliffe whistled from a rise 20 meters away and held up a roll of orange surveyor's tape. It was time to start laying out Mitchell's landing. They'd have to work quickly before the sun was too hot. So, it's going to be hot. So, Weber said, he's coming in by air. She spat brown juice in the yellowed napkins. Her cheek was packed with Copenhagen snuff. Got it, Turner said. He sat beside her on a ledge of buff shade. They were watching Lynch and Nathan clear the strip he and Sutcliffe had laid out with the orange tape. The tape marked out a rectangle 4 meters wide and 20 long. Lynch carried a length of rusted I-beam to the tip and heaved it over. something scurried away through the brush as the beam rang on concrete. They can see that tape if they want to. Whoever said it, wiping her lips with the back of her hand. The headlines on your morning fags if they want to. I know, Turner said. But if they don't know we're here already, I don't think they're going to. And you couldn't see from the highway. He adjusted the black nylon pen Ramirez had given him, pulling the long bill down until it touched the sunglasses. Anyway, we're just moving the heavy stuff. Things that could tear a leg off. Isn't going to look like anything. Not more of it. Yeah, Weber agreed. Her seamed face impassive beneath her sunglasses. You could smell her sweat from where she sat. Sharp. Animal. What the hell did you do, Weber, when you aren't doing this? He looked at her. Probably a hell of a lot more than you do, she said. Part of the time I breed dogs. She took a knife from her boot and began to strop it occasionally in her soul, flipping it smoothly with each stroke, like a Mexican barber sharpening a razor. And that fish? Trout. You have people in New York State. Probably don't believe that, she said flatly. I figured the ones like you and Sutcliffe. You aren't in any place at all. This is where it is, isn't it, Turner? On the site today. Today your boyfriend's out there. She tested the blade against the ball of her thumb, then slid it back into the sheath. But you have people. You got a man to go back to? A woman? You said. Know anything about breeding dogs? No, he said. I didn't think so. She squinted at him. Got a kid, too.